Welcome to today's session. We will be speaking about the art of keyframing, what it is, how you can use it in LumaFusion, and hopefully to inspire you as to some creative techniques that you can get started with. My name is Caroline Scott. I'm one of the certified instructors here at LumaTouch. We've got the wonderful Amy Benson and Scott Squire who will be answering your questions in the discussion box. So please do make use of that. They're on hand for the whole 45 minutes to an hour that we're all going to be together. So first off, keyframing. What is it? Just have a think to yourself for a moment. Perhaps you could write in the chat box, what do I actually mean when I say keyframing? Because whenever we talk about editing, there's always kind of these technical jargon words that we kind of throw around. And sometimes when you're not doing editing as a full-time job, it can seem a little bit daunting, can't it? We've got all of these, as I say, technical phrases that we use. But if we actually haven't done it before, it can seem a bit confusing. This is my description that I use to help people understand an editing technique that enables you to make changes to your media over time. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can make a change to the color and effects, say. So we've got an image here. We could, of course, have our picture as it stands like this, or we could have that picture change over time, just like this. So we have an image here. And as you can see, as time goes on, the color is slowly fading out of that picture. So that is a change that is happening over time. We have changed into the frame and fit. So we can have a video play like this, and we can make a cut, and we can zoom into that image, or we can actually have that change happen gradually over time. So there we saw almost like a harsh cut, but actually what we want to happen is a video to maybe zoom in quite subtly, not having something that's so jarring to watch. That is what we mean by a keyframe. So this example here is a change to the frame and fit. You can see this video is slowly zooming in. So it's not as jarring to the eye. Or perhaps we can have a change to the frame and fit by moving a clip from one side of the screen to the other. So here we have a video clip we've just seen, and we're moving it from the left to the right. Now you can see in these very simplistic examples how easy it is to do, but we must get our head around exactly how we use keyframes and how they actually work. So we're going to be diving into that and showing you some examples now. So some of you might have played around with keyframing in the past. You cannot break anything within LumaFusion. So what I encourage you to do is to open up the editors now, and we're going to try doing some keyframing together. So you should now be able to see my timeline here. And I have a video clip on the timeline of this beautiful time lapse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into that and show you our frame and fit editor. Okay, so here we are in the frame and fit editor. Those of you that have been to the beginner session that we did, the back to school session a while ago now, we examined the frame and fit editor. We explored all of these different functions. But the keyframing aspect is an issue in itself because it does take a little bit of time to get your head around. So as I say, this is why we've saved it to today. These dots at the bottom left-hand corner are called keyframes. So we've noted there that the description of keyframing is making a change to a piece of media over time, okay? It's a technique. So if you're going to be using that technique, you need to use what we call keyframes in order to do so. So those keyframes are at the bottom left of the screen, and I want you to think of them like every time you add a keyframe to a piece of media, you are giving it an order, okay? So it is a direction that you are telling this piece of media what it has to do, okay? Now, what you're telling it to do will depend on the editor that you're actually in within LumaFusion. So at the moment, you can see at the bottom down here at the bottom of the screen, we're in the frame and fit editor. You'll remember that the frame and fit editor is all about the framing and the position of your clip on screen, whether it's in the bottom, at the top, whether it's small, whether it's big, whether it's upside down, okay? So the frame and fit is all about where the video or the image is on the screen. So the frame and fit, if we're going to be adding keyframes to that, will be where our video is on screen, but making a change to that over time. So what I would like us to do is to jump straight in and all add a keyframe to our video straight away. Now, Down here at the bottom of the screen, we have our playhead. Okay, now if I drag this across, we can see all the individual frames of our video. Wherever this playhead is where we're going to add a keyframe as part of our clip. Okay, so let's say, for example, we want our video to zoom in while it's playing, like I showed you in the example before. What we're going to do is we're going to say to it, we want you to start in one position and we want you to finish in another position, okay? That is two different orders. And we're going to add two different keyframes for those two orders, okay? So to understand, we're going to do this together and then I'm going to set you a fun little task. So we're going to add a keyframe at the beginning of this clip. So we're going to bring this keyframe, if it's not already, all the way down to the first frame of the clip. We're going to activate the keyframes by turning this on. I'm going to tap once. Now you can see, as I've tapped the keyframing icon down there at the bottom, we've added a keyframe to the timeline, okay? We've added a keyframe to that clip. So we've said to this clip, at this location, as it's going to play through, we want it to look like this. So we've already added that keyframe for the first frame. Now, if by the end of our clip, what I want you to do is move this playhead to the end, either by dragging, or you can tap this icon here to jump forwards. I want you to add another keyframe for me. Add a keyframe. So now we've added two different keyframes. Now, while the playhead is actually on the keyframe, you can see the keyframe is quite large. You see it's blue with a white circle around it. Over here, we're not on that keyframe, so it's just a small blue circle. Now we're on the last keyframe. What we're going to do is we're going to move our video. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so now we've given it a second order. We've said, at the end of this clip, I want the video to look like this. Okay, so you've added two keyframes. You've made your video look like two different positions at two different parts of the clip playing out. So now if you play your clip, it will look something like this. You see it's started in its initial position. And if you look at the frames of this clip, you can see it's zooming in as it plays. Okay, so depending on how long or short your clip is, it might move slower or quicker, depending on how close your keyframes are together. You can see this clip as a whole is a little bit longer. So you can see over time, this is going to look like a really beautiful, smooth keyframe. If I was to drag this playhead across much faster, I'd be able to see the keyframe moving. You can see this. You can see that clip moving, and we're getting much closer to the content. This will work exactly the same, whether you're using a photo, whether you're using a video, it doesn't matter. All you're doing is you're saying your media is going from one position to another. So let's try that again. I'm going to show you on a completely new clip now. So if I just jump to another clip on my timeline. Again, I have a beautiful video. I'm going to zoom in from point A to point B. So what I would like you to do at home, I would like you to talk me through it. I know I can't hear you, but think about what I've just told you in terms of adding an order to the clip. Okay, so I wanted to start in its original position. What am I going to do? I'm going to add a keyframe by activating the keyframes down there at the bottom left. Now, as my video plays through, I'm going to zoom in. And now my video will zoom in as it plays. It's going from part 1 to part 2. Okay. Now, if I want to remove a keyframe, let's say I really didn't like that bit at the end, I can just tap the X icon here to remove a single keyframe, or the stack of keyframes on the far left, which will remove all of them. Okay, so I'm going to remove that last one, and then I can make an adjustment. Okay, all okay at home. Great. Okay, so that is an initial frame and fit change that you can make to your video, to change the frame and the fit. What I would like you now to do is to try to create yourself at home this movement. So watch as our logo is going from the bottom left on the screen to the top right on the screen. So really think about that. What I would like you to do is get your logo down, or any image that you have within your LumaFusion editor, and I would like you to create this effect where it's moving from the bottom left of the screen to the top right. And I'm going to show you inside the editor what this looks like, just so you can get some clues. Okay, have a go with that. Remember, we're moving our clip from the bottom left to the top right. I'm going to give you only 1 minute to do that. And I know that is a very hard task to do in a minute. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to actually show you in a second. Okay, so remember, if we want something to move from point A to point B, we're going to have a keyframe at every moment. There's an order. So A, at the first point, we're going to set it into its position. And B, at the second point, we're going to add another keyframe and add it into position. Have a quick go with that. And I'm going to show you from scratch how I would do that. Okay, so I have my clip here on the timeline. Okay, my clip is playing out. And we can see down here on the timeline, if we look at it, our clip is quite long. Now, depending on how long your video clip is, if of course you add a keyframe at the beginning of the clip and a keyframe at the end of the clip, your change, whatever that might be, is going to happen over the course of that time. Okay, so it depends on how long on the timeline your clip is. Okay, so I'm just going to make this a bit shorter now. So I'm going to show you a change over a small amount of time. So I'm going to jump into that image and I'm going to put my playhead at the beginning. Please all do this with me at home if you haven't figured it out. And I'm going to add a keyframe. Okay, so I've added my first keyframe. That's my first order. Now I'm going to make sure that my image is in its first initial position. So remember I said I wanted it to be down here at the bottom, but I also wanted it to be quite small. Okay, so I'm going to move this into its first position because I want it off screen. Okay, so all do that with me, please. So you've added a keyframe and you've set this frame and fit and position of your logo, of your image, wherever you want it to be on screen. Now, depending on how long that image is on the timeline for, I'm just going to bring that playhead to the end. Now, what I didn't show you before is I added a keyframe by pressing that white icon. However, because you've already activated keyframes here, wherever you move that picture now, if this is on a fresh frame that you haven't already got a keyframe, it's just going to add a keyframe automatically for you. Okay, so I've got my playhead on the frame I want at the end of this clip, and I'm going to move my logo up to the top right. So now we've given it two orders, easy peasy. Okay, at the beginning we wanted it down here, and at the end we wanted it at the top right. So now when I play that clip through, it's going to move from the first position to the second position. Now, if I want to make that transition faster, what I would need to do is I would need to just remove that keyframe at the end and add a new keyframe in a shorter time like this. So perhaps there, and you can see that change now will happen between the two keyframes. Is everybody with us? Okay, so that's the basics of the frame and fit editor when you're working with keyframing. Okay, now you'll notice that as my video plays on, I've got some time left on the timeline after that second keyframe has been added. Now, the video isn't changing because I haven't made any changes now. All I've said is order 1 be at the bottom left, order 2 be at the top right, and then it's just waiting because I haven't given it any other instructions, right? So that means if I want my image to stay still, I don't have to do anything. But what happens if I want my image to go up to the top right and then perhaps whiz off the screen after it stayed still for maybe like a second? What I would do is I would make sure that I add another keyframe here, let's say about, I don't know, let's keep it still for a second. And then we're going to whiz off really, really fast off the timeline. Not to stretch it, let's use these sliders to be really accurate. And we're going to whiz it away. Okay, so now we can see our image, or it could be a video, is going to do exactly what I've told it to. It's going to move between these keyframes. So it's staying still between the two keyframes that are exactly the same. If you make the mistake of adding keyframe after keyframe after keyframe without keeping that still part. If you want that, then your video, your image on screen will just continuously move, because you'll notice that between the two keyframes, that's where the movement happens, okay, or not, okay? So whatever's going to happen in between these two keyframes is going to happen depending on the orders you've given it. Scott, Amy, do we have any questions that I need to go over in terms of people not understanding this section just before I move on?
So far, it looks good, Caroline.
Great.
Yeah, just let us know if you have any questions.
Great. Okay, guys, so that's within the frame and fit. So we've all figured this out. We can do the Ken Burns effect where we're zooming into a clip. We can also move our clips from the bottom left to the top right. Okay, now what happens though if we want to keyframe our audio? That's completely separate, isn't it? Keyframing audio seems scary, but the amount of times we get asked, how do I fade my audio in? How do I fade my audio out? But without having to make loads and loads of cuts and add the cross dissolve transition, for example. Now, of course, we know that with fading audio in, fading audio out, as I've just said, we do have the transition available where you can go up to the top here, tap on transitions, and you can add any transition and it will add naturally a fade in or a fade out on your audio. However, if you want to have complete control over the levels of your audio, perhaps you want it to come in, then you want it to come out, and so on and so forth, you might not want to use a transition. You might want to take control using keyframes. So let's say you're doing a podcast and you want the audio to completely move depending on perhaps different adverts you're using, you speaking, your guest speaking, and so on. You're going to want to add your own keyframes in. So I'm just going to delete that transition. I'm going to double tap on my audio. Now you'll know here we are in the audio editor. Okay, so it works in exactly the same way. Don't be put off by the fact it looks slightly different. All we've got the bunch of keyframes at the bottom left. And what you're changing is going to depend on the editor that you're in, right? So we're in the audio editor. So the keyframes are going to be based on your audio. Now we can see here on the left-hand side that we've got the gain tab open. Now, the keyframes that you add for any of these editors will be based on the tab that you have open on the right. So if we have the gain tab open, this is the one we all know and love, to reduce the audio levels, to raise the audio levels, double tap to reset them. We're going to add a keyframe to that gain, and that's where we're going to be able to fade our audio in and out, make it louder and quieter as it plays out. Now, let's all try that together. So let's say we want our audio to be really quiet at the beginning and then come up to the standard level, 0 decibels, you can see on the right-hand side, and we want it to come in to the usual level that we're happy with, but we want to fade that in as it goes. So we're going to add a keyframe. I'm going to do this the opposite way around now, and I want you guys to guess why I'm doing this the opposite way. I'm going to add a keyframe at one part, and then I'm going to start it. I'm going to add a keyframe here, and we're going to reduce that audio. Look what's happening when I reduce that audio. The green line on the audio wave is heading down to the bottom, right? So we've got that diagonal line up. So that means when I play my audio through, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear this, but it will fade in. Okay, you can't hear this at home, but the audio is fading in as it plays. Give this a go. Now you can see there that's going to do the exact same thing as adding a cross dissolve transition. So what you can do when you're using keyframe is perhaps dip the audio as it's playing. So let's say, for example, we want our audio to now come down a bit when it gets to this portion here. Our keyframes are activated. Can we see there at the bottom left? We've got our keyframes activated. Sorry, I keep tapping on that. So, okay, and we're going to just bring that gain down. And now we can see the audio level is going down again. Okay, so it's pretty simple, guys, right? Every time you add a keyframe, you're going to give the tool an order of what you want it to sound like, okay? Because we're in the audio editor. Move the playhead along there. We're going to bring that gain back up. Okay, so you can imagine what's going to happen with your audio here. It's going to go get louder, get louder, get louder, get quieter, get quieter, get quieter, and back up again. Okay, the reason why I sometimes add keyframes in the opposite order to what you might think is because you might already be happy or with the frame and fit or the audio level, and you might want to change what happens before then. So you must add your keyframes in an order that's going to make sense for the transition or the animation that you want to create. So if you already had the audio at a really suitable level for, let's say, YouTube, but you wanted it to fade in over a very specific set of time using, you know, the individual that's frame by frame editors here, icons there, you basically can start where you want it to finish and then you can work backwards. So with keyframing, you don't have to start at the very beginning of every single clip you use. You can start wherever you want, okay? So adding keyframes is all about trial and error, so practicing as you go along. So we've used the keyframes within the frame and fit. Now we've just added keyframes within the audio editor. So let's go and check out keyframes in another one of the editors, shall we? So let's try this within, what should we try now? We'll go to the color and effects. Okay, so we've got our beautiful island clip here. Lovely, beautiful colors. But as we said, keyframing is all about making changes over time. So a lot of you guys will be adding effects or changing the color of a clip, but it changes the entire color or adds an effect for the entirety of the clip. Some of the time you're going to want to be a lot more subtle with the change. Maybe make your clip black and white over time, maybe add the blur effect as your clip is playing out. And that way you can be really artistic with your shots. So if I double tap on this clip, and I'm going to go into the color and effects editor here, you can see on the right hand side, we've got all of our color presets. We've got all of our effects going across the top. Now, let's say we're going to do a really simplistic one to start with. We want to make this clip turn black and white as it plays. Okay, so in exactly the same vein as what we've just done, we're going to tap to make a change to our clip. Now, usually if we want a clip to be black and white, you can either add the black and white preset here, or you can bring that saturation right down. Okay, trouble is, as I say, you've now changed that for the entirety of the clip. Okay, so if you want your clip to start out, let's say you want it to start black and white and we want to bring the color back in, what are we going to do? We're going to add a keyframe wherever we want the effect to start and a keyframe wherever we want the effect to reduce. So let's say, for example, here we want it to start black and white. We're going to add a keyframe at the beginning. Now, as the clip plays out, perhaps once we get to this frame here, we want the color to come back to that clip. So all I'm going to do now is my keyframes are activated, so I can either add a new keyframe or I can just make a change straight away. I'm going to bring that saturation level up. And now you can see as my clip plays out, it's going to go from the first order to the second order. So this is a journey, okay? This is not going from one to the next. This is a journey as it travels, okay? So think of every change you make, it's about the incremental journey between the two, okay? So now you can see the colors coming in back to that beautiful, vivid color. Okay, so what I would like you to do at home is to add another keyframe to your clip, but within the color and effects editor. Okay, so let's say, for example, here, we wanted to add another effect. Okay, so we've already changed it from color to black and white. And as you can see, our keyframes have gone because I've closed that tab. Can you see that little blue circle there next to where it says original? That means that within that individual effect or that tab, we have added a keyframe, okay? Because sometimes we get really excited and we add loads of keyframes to our content and then we can't remember, like, where's the keyframe? So actually that little blue circle is really important, okay? So what I would like you to do now is I would like you to add perhaps a blur to your video. So you're going to tap up here at the top and add a blur. I'm going to go for this one here. And you can see we've added a blur to the entire clip, okay? Because we haven't added any keyframes yet. So we can see we're starting a complete fresh. That doesn't mean that the keyframes aren't already there. It means the keyframes are on original. You can see when I open the original tab here on the right-hand side, the keyframes are there. I'm going to close original, which is where we added the black and white. And I'm going to open up that tab there for Gaussian 10. And you can see now I can add my own keyframes. So let's say once we get back to full color, we now want the clip to start being blurred. So I'm going to add a keyframe and I'm going to reduce the blur radius. and then I want it to go blurry. I'm just going to move my playhead along, and I'm going to bring that blur all the way back. And again, I'm going to bring my playhead along like this. I'm going to add another keyframe, and I'm going to take that blur off. Okay, so now when my clip plays out from the first keyframe, we're going to start completely sharp. It's going to get completely blurred, and now the focus is coming back in. So imagine you were doing a video, for example. Let's say you were doing a point of view video where somebody was perhaps putting glasses on, and you had a video which was looking out of their eyes. As soon as they put the glasses on, you want the focus to come back in. That would be a lovely example of using the blur filter, for example, where you can bring that back on using keyframing. So we can see here we're in the color and effects editor. We've actually added two different layers. We've added the original preset where we've taken away that color, and we've also added a blur. Okay, so we can see how you can use keyframes together. Okay, so you can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus keyframes to one individual clip within only one editor. So think of the capabilities that you can do by mixing all of these keyframes together. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of this clip, and we can see as I play out, this is the first keyframe that we're playing, black and white to color. And you can see because I've closed the tabs on the right, we can't see the keyframes play out at the bottom, but we know they're happening because we can see it's changing on screen. It's blurring my clip, and then it's bringing that focus back in. Okay. You guys must have seen in the past people with green screen backgrounds where all of a sudden it goes from green and then it slowly changes to the actual thing that they've keyed in. That would be your green screen chroma key, for example. So going onto your tabs up here at the top, tapping on an effect and adding keyframing. And you can keep going with this as much as you want, like really kind of try to be experimental. So, you know, you can do this as much or as little as you like. Let's say we want to add, you know, a vignette around our clip. We're going to add a keyframe, and we can see as I scroll through, I can actually see everything play out in one go. So let's say once it gets to max blurriness, we want the intensity of a vignette to go away. And there we go. We've added a vignette over time. So you can be as experimental as you like here. Any questions on this, Amy, that have come through, or are we good?
We're good. Yeah, just let us know if you have any questions, or let us know if you're having successes as well.
Fabulous. Thank you, guys. Right, so now we're going to move on to titles, keyframing titles. Okay, so in the past we've spoken about the title editor where you can add text, shapes, objects and so on to your videos, making beautiful main titles or overlays on your timeline. However, we're going to be talking now about how we can move those titles around. So in the last session, we made this title, didn't we? Time for a Vacation. So I found this nice clip of a plane taking off from a runway or landing on a runway, for example, and I'm going to keyframe this title that's going to move around on top of our clip. So usually sometimes when we make titles, we want to add changes to those titles. So perhaps we want it to swoop in, maybe we want it to dissolve onto screen, maybe we want it to move in a particular fashion. Now you can use transitions on your titles, so I'll show you some of those. You can just drag and drop, for example, wipe spin, and it will make a lovely effect. Ta-da, lovely. Or you can maybe do like a cross dissolve, drag and drop that on, and it will dissolve on. But if you want to be, again, very specific in the time you want your title to land on screen, or a specific frame in which you want it to do a somersault across the top of your video, you need to use keyframing. So think of keyframing in the aspect of creating your own animated transitions. You really have a lot of freedom with the movement of your clips so that you can animate these yourself. So I'm going to double tap on my title here. Okay, now you can see at the title editor, I've got a lot of different layers for this because I was trying to be arty and create like a sunshine around the wording there. But you can see because we are editing a title, it's one complete flat layer. Okay, so if you've got a complete flat layer like this, for example, you can add a keyframe to the entirety of how it of how it moves around the screen. So to do so, I'm going to go into the frame and fit of that title. Once I'm in the frame and fit editor like this, you can move the entire thing as a whole and move it around your screen as you like. So let's say, for example, I want this entire title to zoom in from the middle. I'm going to add a keyframe there, and as soon as the plane lands, perhaps I want it to pop up on screen. So I'm going to add a keyframe there. Notice I'm not actually doing anything. I'm not changing anything in terms of the position X, Y, rotation yet, because all I'm doing is adding the keyframes. This is another way to use them. By watching the clip through and saying, there, I want it to come up on screen, and perhaps maybe you're going to move it left and right a little bit. I can add the keyframes first, and then I can change the properties of each keyframe if and when I want. So let's say, for example, I want it to be on screen until here. I'm going to add a keyframe, and then I want it to whiz off the screen about here. That's fine. Remember, I'm not just kind of guessing through these. I'm watching that plane land. I'm watching what's happening on screen. So do this while you're actually editing yourselves. Now I can tap on each individual keyframe, and I can change the way it looks on screens because we're in the frame and fit editor. Okay. So let's say now all of these have exactly the same property because we haven't changed anything. And as I say, I like to work backwards like this. You might not like to do that. It's completely up to you. And that's where the flexibility of your editing comes in. So we're going to start off with that frame and fit editor. Instead of actually using it with my hands like this, with my fingers, I'm going to use the sliders on the right-hand side. Now you can see we're in the size and position tab, hence why we've got that blue dot there, okay? Now I'm going to make the size of this really small all the way, so I can't even see it, 0.1. And now you can see between point A and point B, my first and second keyframe, it's going to go from the first position to the second position. Now it's going to stay completely still because I haven't made any changes to those keyframes. So now let's say I want it to stay completely still between these two. That's why the keyframes are exactly the same in terms of their properties. And let's say I want it to wiggle a bit left and right. Okay, how would I do that? I would add a keyframe where it moves to the left and one to the right, and when it comes back straight. Okay, so that's 3 different orders. So that means, let's say about there, we want it to move to the left. Just going to move with my fingers. I clip to the left. Again, it's just added a keyframe. Now I want to move it to the right. It's added a keyframe, and it's going to naturally move back to center because of the properties of each of these keyframes. So when I play that through, you see now it's going to move left, move right, and completely be straight. And then let's say I'm going to have it stay still for a while, add another keyframe, and then I just want it to whiz off screen. I'm going to add another keyframe at the end, and we're going to move it up to the top. Okay, so there I've asked it to get smaller and move upwards, vertically upwards. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. If you're ever confused as to what a clip is going to do, think of the properties of each keyframe and note that in between each keyframe is the distance, the journey that the animation is going to take. Okay, so if I said to you, you've got 5 seconds to run from wherever you are to the other side of the room, and you have to be sat on the floor, you would go in the easiest way, in the quickest way, to be from sitting down at your desk now to sitting on the floor next to the wall in 5 seconds, in exactly that time. That is exactly what a keyframe does. You give it an order, you give it a frame and fit in this example. And in the time frame you've set, based on the timeline at the bottom of the clip there, that's the journey it's going to take. Okay, it's not going to randomly surprise you by going upside down, inside out. It's just going to do exactly what you've asked it to. So we've set our keyframe to start really small. We set it to zoom in, get larger on screen. Then we asked it to stay completely still. And then we've asked it to move left, move right, straighten out, stay still, and to go off into the sky. Okay, so you can see, if I actually look down here at the clip, that looks pretty complex, doesn't it? All these dots, it doesn't actually say what each one does. But you can see if I tap on any of them, on the right-hand side of the screen, those sliders will tell me precisely the position X and Y and the rotation of that clip. Okay, so make sure that you're really using those sliders on the right. You can use the pencil icon here if you really want to get very, very specific with the movement of your clips, making sure I was just doing that with my fingers there, left, right, and making it straight. But if you need to get really specific, maybe you're working for a client where you need everything to be completely perfect, pixel by pixel, make sure that you're using numerical values on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, is everybody with me so far? Amy, Scott, we're good. Everyone's happy. Fabulous. So while we're doing that, I'm going to talk you through some other use cases for using keyframing. Now, a lot of people have not experimented with things like audio panning, with things like blending modes. So we're going to dive into some of those because you can really make some lovely effects with your work by actually embracing some of those features that we have within the tool. So let's go back to our clip here where we had this beautiful time lapse and we were zooming in on the clips as it was time lapsing across. Now we also, for example, have this clip here. In fact, I'm going to bring this over and put it on top. Now, with blending modes, we briefly jumped into those in the advanced back to school lesson. If you haven't dived into blending modes at all, don't panic. I'm just going to show you briefly what they are. If I just double tap on a clip here, I'm just going to remove the keyframes from this completely so that we're completely comfortable that we are working with a fresh clip so it's not confusing. I'm just going to remove all of these. Lovely. So we've got our clip back to normal now. You can see down here there's an option called blending. Okay, this is in your frame and fit editor. Now we can see on screen right now I have clip 1 over clip 2. Okay, that's because they're layered on the timeline. We know how layering works because we always have a clip on the main track and a clip on top. That means this is our layered clip here. So if I double tap on that top layer, blending mode is all about the opacity of the clip on top in relation to the clip underneath. But depending on the blend mode you choose, it will give you different visual effects. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring that back to fill the screen here. In fact, I'll be professional and tap this icon here so it jumps back to the official size. And we're going to go down here to the blending mode. Now, you can see at the moment we're in blend mode normal. Okay, blend mode normal. It does what everybody understands opacity to be. We're just going to be able to see the clip underneath as I bring that back up again. Okay, so we're bringing the opacity level down and up. All it's doing is reducing the opacity of the pixels that we have in our clip. However, if you tap on this icon next to normal, you're going to be able to see different blend modes. Now, depending on which one you choose, what the blend modes will do is they'll compare things like the luminance value, the colors that you've got in your clip with specifically the clip underneath it, okay? So you only use blending modes if you're using a clip that's layered on top of something. So we're adding the blend modes to the top clip, okay? So you can see as I scrub through these, my clip is going to look completely different, okay? Because it's pulling out all of the lights and the darks and the highlights of one clip on top of another, okay? So when you're going through your options at home, I hope you guys are doing this with me. Please do layer a clip on top of another. That could be a photo, that could be 2 videos. It doesn't matter what it is. You can see here it's going to look completely separate. So my pin light, for example, will look different to yours because it's looking at the lights, darks, colors, and so on in your clips. So what I would like us to do now is I would like us to add a blending mode, but use keyframes to do it, okay? Because we're going to get snazzy now, okay? We've done the kind of basics of how we move a clip from left to right, zooming in and so on. What I would like us to do is actually think about the visual effects of your storytelling, because a lot of people will use keyframing not just to make something look pretty, but to actually help you to tell a story. They use it within their story arc because you can transition between scenes. You know, if someone's dreaming of something, you could keyframe one clip on top of another to really come in and out as the action's taking place, for example. Or you can use keyframing in a variety of other effects as you are developing a storyline. So in this example here, we've got this beautiful clip of this island on top of this starry night. Let's choose something that's going to look nice. And when you guys are at home, as you're doing it now, I would like you to have a go with this yourself. So I'm just going to choose, let's see, color dodge. We can see how that's going to look as our video clip plays. Oh, you can get really snazzy with this. Here we go. And just choose one that you think is going to look nice. You can see they give you such different effects. It's really worth kind of taking the time to pick one that works for you. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a few blue touch screens on my screen at the moment, but you can see the one I'm actually on where my finger is the one that's moving. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to bring the opacity in and out as the clip is playing through. So we can see this here is my clip underneath and this is my clip on top. I'm going to add a keyframe at the beginning of this clip when my opacity is down, and I can add another keyframe, bring the opacity all the way back up. And now you can see as I play this clip, if you watch, what we're going to be doing is blending those two clips together ever so gradually by using the opacity keyframes. Okay, so I want you to play around with some of those at home. You can play with two different clips if you like. In fact, I'll show you how this works on top of something like a logo, for example, you might want to use. So we have our logo here. Let's just take those keyframes off, bring that back in. Perhaps you want to add your logo. Okay, so let's try to blend that. So again, we're in the frame and fit editor here. I'm going to tap on blending, and now you can see adding all of these, you can get some really cool effects. So have a play with this yourself at home, and you can see as I use this blending mode, your clip can come in and out. Okay, so it's exactly the same, right? So we're going to start with the opacity at one level, maybe bring it back in. Make sure you're adding your keyframes here. And perhaps bring it back out again. And you can see you can really have some fun with this as it plays through. And all I'm doing is just giving it specific orders as my clip plays on. Okay, so have a little play with that. What I want you to do is create some kind of cool effects. You can see here we've got our LumaTouch logo kind of hovering there in the ether. But you know, you can play around with this yourself, depending on the clips you've got, depending on the colors you want to work with. Really try to get experimental with keyframing. Now, as I say, guys, keyframing is for any change you make over time. Images, videos, or audios, or audio. Now, you can use this by itself just to create a simple Ken Burns effect where you are zooming into a clip. Or perhaps you want to use it to really be whizzy. Every time you watch a YouTube video, for example, where we have someone's like and subscribe button flying in and flying out, or somebody might be like, you know, hovering their hands up and they've got their logo and it's going up or down depending on where their hand is. All that is being able to keyframe. Okay, so you can create that kind of effect within LumaFusion.
Caroline, Natalia asks, is there a way each keyframe can be used as a different blend mode?
No, so you would have to, let's say you're in a clip like this. In fact, let me just get a simple clip out like this. So Natalia is asking if you add a keyframe here, for example, and then switch blend modes. Is that right, Natalia? Yeah, so yeah, okay. So let's say, for example, we have two clips. Let me just find some nice fresh clips for us. Okay. Okay, Natalia, any clip can only have one blend mode attached to it at one time. But if you wanted to get really snazzy with it, you could layer up your clips on top of one another to create multiple effects. So if I was to double tap into this clip here, we can see in the blending mode, we added, didn't we, all of those keyframes to that. Let me just take those off for a second so we can see our clip. So let's say, for example, we wanted it to start with soft light, for example, and I wanted to add the keyframes coming in and coming out. Now, I can't actually now click another blending mode, because what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, Caroline, for this clip, you wanted soft light. So now if I change this to say pin light, now the blending mode is just for pin light. So you would have to then go back here, Natalia, and then double up the clip and then change the blending mode for that specific clip. So now I would put on soft light. Okay, you can see you've still got the same keyframe because we've just doubled up that clip. What I would do then, Natalia, is say, let's say at this point here, we wanted it to change from pin light to soft light. I would just make sure that clip is trimmed there. Then on the clip underneath, I would trim it to the left, say, and now you can see it's going to be at the same stage, but the blending mode will have changed. What I would recommend in that scenario, if you really wanted to do that, if you felt it worked for the clip, is to then add like some kind of cross dissolve, or like just to make it a little bit less jittery, basically. So you wouldn't have your clip, you see there, it looks a lot less kind of from one to the other, and you can play around with that a little bit more, you know. But it's really worth playing with the blend modes. As you can see, there's lots of different options you can do. I will, when I send you the recording of this talk, I'm going to send you some of the blend mode winners from one of the LumaFusion contests we did a while back, where there's some fantastic examples of where people have blended oceans into cityscapes and, you know, stars in the night sky with their titles and so on and so forth. And remember, if you want to get even more creative, you could potentially have let's say your blend modes work within your title. So you could make an amazing title. You could export it with HEVC with transparency, so you can have a transparent background. Then you could, like, you know, keyframe out the green in there, and then you could put clips underneath, and then you could keyframe the movement of the clips underneath. You can just layer all of these effects. So if you see something on TV or on YouTube or on TikTok and you think, oh, that's such a cool effect, how do I create it? My best advice, I'm just going to stop sharing. If you see something that you like and you think, how did they do that? That just looks so complex. Please do take a screen recording, bring that into LumaFusion, or record it on your TV, you know, film your TV, do a screen recording on your phone, bring it into LumaTouch. And a really good exercise to do is to try to recreate it with a clip of your own, because what you'll usually find with kind of complex transitions and keyframes is that there's a mixture of keyframes happening at the same time. So today I showed you keyframing within the frame and fit editor within the size and positioning tab, but you could of course have a clip zoom in at the same time it's cropping from the outside inwards. At the same time, it's turning black and white with the blur effect happening. So you can, whenever there's multiple things going on, it looks to the human eye like, okay, that's so complex. Perhaps it's like a pre-made transition or whatever. But really, you can recreate those. If there is something that you see, that's my best advice going forward, is to just try to recreate that effect yourself. Because once you do that, your creativity just starts, you know, building and building as you start editing. So you'll be able to kind of think of ideas actually while you're on the timeline, as opposed to thinking, okay, what do I do with this title? I have no idea. You could actually just get on the timeline and just start having fun. And I find myself, Scott and Amy, you probably find this as well, that a lot of your creativity when you're editing happens when you're actually on the timeline, not necessarily in your head before, because your story and your editing evolves as you actually are working. So that would be my advice. And I'm sure you guys have your own ways of working, but really do go and practice this, because keyframing does seem a bit complex at first. I understand that it's not as easy as just trimming a clip, for example. That's an easy thing to do, but something like this is a little bit more technical. So if you do get stuck on it, stick with the basics of keyframing, and then you can build up from there. Do we have any further questions or discussion points that you guys would like us to dive into? We've got about 5 more minutes, so we're happy to do so if you would like us to. Scott, perhaps you could tell us, I know we were discussing a little bit before we went live today, the capabilities of keyframing when it comes to, you were talking about number plates and people's faces. Can you give us a few examples of when you might use it?
So a question that comes in pretty often from users of LumaFusion is, what if I need to blur out something in the picture and not the rest of it, in a video and not the rest of it. So I've got somebody behind me and I don't have a release from them to show their face in my production. So what I want to do is I will use keyframing. I will make another instance of the same video, and then I will crop and put that over the top on the layer above. I'll crop that down so that it's just that face, and then I will apply a blur on that top video. So there's a blur on that face. And if that person moves, I use keyframing to move that crop along so that that piece of blur marked goes around the screen to follow that thing. Same with a license plate frame on a car, a license plate on a car or something like that. That's a use case that a lot of people wonder about, that keyframing is the best answer for.
Thank you, Scott. That's great. And I think, guys, we're actually going to do an advanced keyframing session. So thank you, Bob and Patrick, and all you guys who have been enjoying it, because come along to the next one, because we're going to dive deeper into these individual examples that Scott just been mentioning. Stuff like how to create content for like news packages, perhaps, where you might need to use keyframing in there, blurring people's faces, you know, as Scott said, number plate licenses and all sorts of stuff like that. So real use case scenarios. So please do have a go with this yourselves. Get confident with the technique. And then for specific examples and a deeper dive, we're going to do that for the next session. Okay, so please do come along to that. I will send you guys an email in the next few hours with the recording of this session. So if you do have any questions specifically, or any areas of keyframing in particular that you want us to cover in the next session, you can either write them on the form, or you can just email me and we can we can dive into that. But it's been a pleasure to be with you guys. And Scott and Amy, thank you so much for monitoring the chat. And guys, keep joining us for these free online training sessions. It's really lovely to have you guys as the community getting involved. So please do let us know anytime you need our help. And yeah, it's a pleasure to see you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, Al. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great
guys.
weekend. Bye. Thanks, Caroline.